Welcome to Perspective and Potential, where we uncover new ways to see the world and tap into the incredible potential within each of us. I'm Abigail Strait, joined by my co host and mother, Gwen Fund. Together, we'll explore ideas, stories, and strategies designed to help you grow, shift your perspective, and embrace a more complete version of yourself. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can check us out at perspectiveandpotential.com. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in and see where a new perspective might take you. Today, we are going to talk about the law of the harvest. And if you're not familiar with that phrase, it is one of the most simple yet powerful principles of life. The law of the harvest reminds us that the outcomes we experience are directly tied to the seeds that we plant through our actions, our habits, and our choices. So think of it just like a farmer can't expect a healthy crop without careful preparation and patience. Well, we can't expect growth in our own lives without effort and intention. In this episode, we'll explore how the law of the harvest shows up in so many areas: our work, our relationships, health, and overall happiness, and how understanding this principle can help us live with greater purpose and accountability. When you think about it, this principle really isn't new. It's one of those timeless truths that's been woven through generations, through faiths, and through cultures. Yet, I think it can be easy to forget how universal and practical it really is. So, how does the law of harvest actually play out in everyday life?
Well, so the law of the harvest, simply stated, is whatever we sow, we'll also reap. And I was thinking today we would explore how that age old wisdom plays out in so many areas of our life in terms of our effort, our vocational successes, our health, our relationships, and like you said, the overall level of our happiness. Because I think it's fairly easy to see that principle play out in our vocational life. Because usually our interests and opportunities guide us to learn things that sort of fit into certain vocations. And then the study and the preparation that we engage in refine those certain skills in us that make us proficient and hireable in different fields. And of course, the effort that we put into those preparations and opportunities will also play a part in our success in our chosen field. If we have intense, diligent effort, that will usually bring forth greater fruit in our success than just a minimal effort. And using the analogy of the farmer, like you brought up, and his field, we can help to visualize this process in many ways. If the farmer tills and feeds his soil before he plants his seed, he'll likely harvest more crops at the end of the growing season. If he merely broadcasts the seed across an unprepared field, the crop itself will have a much harder time as it competes with the weeds and other plants already waiting there on the ground. His yield at the end of the growing season will be less in quantity and also quality. And of course, the farmer has to be aware of weather conditions and possible pest infestations. He must consider carefully which crops will do best in a certain field and a certain climate. He must also consider his limitations in time and resources. And as he analyzes all these things, he'll be better equipped to choose the right crop and the right field.
I really love that comparison, and it's pretty direct and correlates directly with the name of the law of the harvest, right? But it highlights just how much of our growth depends on the groundwork we're willing to do. And something else that you pointed out too is it really depends on our anticipation of challenges that are going to come up, right? So whenever we're trying to grow something, we can have the best laid out plan, but there will be things, variables that come into play that challenge us, and we just have to be prepared for those things as well. So just like the farmer's harvest reflects his preparation, our results in life reflect the consistency and the care that we invest into our goals, into our relationships, and into our well being. What's powerful about this law is that it doesn't play favorites, right? I mean, it applies equally to everyone in every area of life. We can't plant seeds of negativity and then expect to feel peace, or we can't sow apathy and expect that we're going to be successful. So I think that's the magic, is that the harvest really mirrors the seed. Which to me, while that is humbling, it's also empowering, because it just reminds us that we have more control over our outcomes than we sometimes realize, truthfully. The law of the harvest calls us to be intentional, to cultivate other attributes like patience as we nurture those good habits and trust that steady, faithful effort always bears fruit in time. It does take time. So it's not about perfection like we've talked before, but it is about persistence. The seeds that we plant today are really ultimately going to shape the future that we one day will get to step into. Um, and again, I think that applies to every part of life. So not just our work, our goals, but our physical, our mental, and emotional well-being too. When we step back and look at how this principle plays out, it's easy to see that what we constantly nurture tends to thrive, and then what we neglect, because I've had those plants too, sometimes they begin to fade.
Well, that's true. And that analogy does play out in a lot of other areas in our life. In our health, for instance, we can apply the same principles and find ourselves growing in strength and vigor. As we contemplate how we feel physically and how we are feeding and caring for our bodies, we can make better choices that are going to help our bodies function at their very best. Um, and now realizing that, not all of us are going to be star athletes, um, but we can take steps to maintain or improve our health, no matter where we happen to be on that spectrum. Just like the farmer, we will encounter unexpected hazards like illness, accidents, or in my case, the effects of aging. Um, and they can set us back. But if we stay diligent and prepared, we can maintain our optimum level of health, whatever that is. And of course, those principles apply to our mental health as well. If we don't take the time to do some self care, to learn about ourselves, to reduce the stress in our lives. Um, if we're not making the changes that we need to make in order to have more social connections, all of those things can affect our mental health. And so, as we plant the seeds of friendship, as we plant the seeds of, like you said, patience or kindness or service, all of
Mhm,
those things can help us to make those connections that are so vital to our mental health. And of course, our relationships can also benefit from the law of the harvest. Taking stock of how healthy our relationships are currently and the planning and care that we're putting into them, that can help us to see where we might need to supplement or protect them from the many diversions that might infest them. In our present day, of course, social media, video games, drugs, excessive work, too much time spent on hobbies, all of these things can weaken our relationships as they consume our time and energy, because relationships grow through love, time, and attention. And a shortage of these elements will weaken or kill the relationship because a relationship is really a living thing. And just like a plant, if it's not nourished, if it is mistreated or subjected to a harsh environment, it will die eventually.
Yeah, that's a powerful reminder, because, that every area of life is kind of a garden, and what we choose to plant and care for will determine what grows, right? Our health, our relationships, like we've been talking about, our sense of peace, none of it just happens by accident. And that's interesting because you hear the phrase that hope is not a strategy, and I think that definitely applies, where we can hope to have successful relationships. We can hope to have peace. We can hope to have a fit and healthy body, but it really truly it just doesn't happen by accident. We have to be intentional, and so it's those daily decisions. It's the consistent attention and the willingness to pull a few weeds along the way, right? That make the difference.
Get rid
Um,
of those things that are not bringing you the results that you want.
exactly, exactly, and that also that's a little bit of an investment of our time, right? Maybe sometimes we're feeling torn because we really want to work towards this goal, but like you just said, we have to also make sure that we are mindful of the weeds that are growing and that we tend to those things as well. And so ultimately the law of the harvest just invites us to be intentional. And every day is a new opportunity, right? But, if we want connection, then plant kindness, like you said. If you want growth, then plant discipline. If you want joy, then plant gratitude, right? It reminds us that small, steady efforts yield the richest harvest, even when the results take time to appear, which can be the discouraging part. But I think when you do start to see, just like a garden, we would do this when our kids were young, right? You have the garden, you take out the seeds, and they're so eager. Maybe for like a week, they're not seeing anything, but the moment they see that littlest bit of growth, it's so encouraging that all the work to build the garden bed, to go and get the supplies, to get the dirt, to then all of that work ahead of time eventually does pay out. And it's just when you see a little bit of growth, that can give you the momentum that you need to carry forward. Um, so I think most importantly, though, it encourages grace for ourselves and for others, right? That knowing that growth takes time, and that there's going to be challenges, but when we keep tending to what matters most, then we can trust that the harvest will come in its time. So everything we've talked about really leads, I feel like, to one simple truth that the harvest we experience in life is directly tied to our choices, the choices that we make and the effort that we're willing to put in. So whether it's our health, relationships, or growth, the same law applies. Again, like you said, that we reap what we sow.
Yeah, you can't plant petunias and get roses. It just doesn't work. Um, and and we have to be really um, continually aware of what we're planting. Um, Sometimes we just expect. I think we live in this supermarket mentality, right? I can just go get it from somebody else, but it really doesn't work that way because in the end, our happiness with ourselves and our life will result from the effort and diligence that we put into the things that matter most. And as we've discussed earlier, our relationships and our health are essential to our level of happiness in life. If we're not taking care of ourselves, then, if we're not being careful with what we eat, what we put into our bodies, with how we treat those around us, it is going to cripple us, it will definitely infect our relationships, and we'll find ourselves maybe in a physical state where we're unable to do the things that we enjoy doing just because we haven't taken the time to plant the right foods into our body or the right amount of exercise. Because during our lifetime. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that reminds me of something that, actually TJ, my brother, said, several weeks ago with what we also intake, right, in social media. Um,
Mhm,
the things that we ingest,
mhm,
um, are is it nourishing to the goals that we have? Not just our body, but also our mind. What are we intaking in our mind? And because that is going to reap what we sow, right? If we are constantly ingesting negative things, um and some of them might be disguised as comedy too. I've seen that. But if that is, what we constantly are hitting the like button on, or we're spending time on, our phones are built to feed us more of what we're clicking on, right?
mhm.
Because the goal is to keep us there. And if we are constantly clicking on things that are negative, and so that's why, I think a strategy that you can employ too is, if you want to feel more peace and you are on social media, I, what I encourage my kids to do is to go ahead and go the extra effort and say, show less of this, right? Click on the three dots or whatever and say, I don't want to see this on my feed. Um, and be intentional about what you click on so that it feeds you more of the things, um, that that are actually going to uplift you. And, when all else fails, just put the phone away and go walk outside and, experience nature or something. And that will also, I think, bring peace. But in a world where I feel like we are constantly anxious, so many of us are anxious, um, bombarded with things on social media. It's really important that we're cognizant of what we're scrolling through.
It's interesting you said that. Anxiety is caused many, many times, because we are caught between 2 decisions: who we want to be versus who we currently are,
Mm,
and how do we get there? Or should I do this or should I not do this? And if you're caught between those kind of guardrails there, uh, the biggest way to relieve that anxiety is to make a decision, right? And
mhm,
that is what I think you're suggesting here with the media. You look at this and maybe it's entertaining, but is it really what you want to spend your time and your energy taking into yourself? And so it creates that anxiety. But yeah, but I enjoy it. But yeah, but it's a waste of time. But yeah, so that
mhm.
creates that anxiety, and you have to just make a decision and push that button and say, "Show less of this," right?
Absolutely.
So, but, during our lifetime, of course, there's gonna be a lot of fields to plant, and some of them will be for pleasure, and some will be for survival, and some will be for personal growth. So there's nothing wrong with making decisions and, like even a farmer lets his field rest with a certain crop. The crops have to be rotated, and there needs to be time for the soil to be replenished and to rest. But some crops, of course, have ideal environments in which to grow, and others will need to be supplemented and protected from harsh environments. But ultimately, the law of the harvest tells us that our efforts and diligence in preparation and then the appropriate care will assure us the harvest of the crops that we plant, whether they be sweet fruits of love and connection or the weeds of loneliness and ill health. In the end, our life becomes the sum total of our choices. And the things that we allowed to grow within ourselves. And so if we can kind of look at our health, our life, our loves, our connections, our relationships, our work, um, and make those choices. Don't get caught in that anxiety between what's easy, but what we really want. If you really want something, it's worth the effort to prepare, to plant, to nourish, and then receive the harvest.
Well, and I think, on that same vein, if it's what we really want, then what I also like to do is flash forward a little bit and ask myself how I'm going to feel in 5, 10 years if I don't make the intentional decision to do it right now. I really, really want this thing, but oh, there's so much work to put into it. And I don't know. I have all of these things going on in my life and I don't have the time right now. And it'd be really great, but it's just maybe I should wait until the turn of the year. Maybe I should wait until the season it gets a little cooler for me to run outside. Um, but if I flash forward and go, well, in 5 years, if I continue with all of these lists of things of what's going to keep me from putting in the work, I'm gonna be in the same exact place, and I'm not going to get that thing that I really, really want.
Friend tell me once that uh, you're going to be someplace in 5 years. You might as well be someplace with a degree. When I was contemplating going back to school. And I
Yeah,
thought about all the work involved in that, but yeah, you're exactly right. You're gonna be someplace in 5 years. Hopefully, you're gonna be someplace that you've chosen to be.
yeah, exactly, and I think that that perspective reminds us that our harvests aren't accidents. They're the product of where we invested our time, our attention, and our heart, right? The law of the harvest isn't about everything being executed perfectly. It's really just about the direction that we're going. So every small, consistent act of goodness, kindness, discipline is a seed with the power to grow into something very meaningful. And we can't always control the weather or the conditions around us, but we can control what we plant, how we nurture it, how we respond when the challenges do come. And that's, I think, where the real also where the fulfillment comes in that growth process. Because you're right, for right now, if we're speaking, sometimes we can go and get corn from the supermarket, but truly, I think the fulfillment comes from not just the harvest, but from the process of growing.
Yeah, and, there will be situations, where there's different droughts of different kinds, right? Maybe, like older people, for instance, start losing family members and friends and people that they've been close to throughout their entire lives. And if you get to the end of your life and find yourself in a drought of companions, right? Are you still going to be okay with being with yourself? Do you have the strength and do you have the reserves stored up in happy memories that will keep you peaceful and calm? There'll be different times where maybe work is hard to find. So we have to look at the droughts in our life and prepare for them because they will come.
And with faith, right, the harvest comes too in its own time, in its own way. And our job is to just keep planning what matters most. In this episode, we explored the timeless principle that whatever we sow is also what we will reap. Through thoughtful conversation and reflection, we looked at how the law of the harvest applies to every area of life: our work, our health, our relationships, and personal growth. We discussed how careful preparation, consistency, and patience determine the quality of our outcomes, much like a farmer's care for his field. Ultimately, we found that the law of harvest is not just about productivity, but about purpose. It's about cultivating a life that yields peace, love, and fulfillment. One seed, one choice, and one season at a time. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, please be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Your input helps shape the conversation and makes perspective and potential even more impactful. We're Gwen and Abby, and you've been listening to Perspective and Potential. Until next time, keep exploring new perspectives and remember that every small change can lead to something big. Food for thought.
Bon appetit.